Welcome. I am Simon Wallace. I'm one of the committee members of the Consulting Specialist Group at the BCS. And I am the Master of Ceremonies for this talk. Also on screen from our side, we have Alan Waugh, who is the chair of that specialist group, and Antonio Hidalgo, who is going to be doing the questions and answers and pressing the buttons on Zoom if he needs to. We have, of course, our honoured guest speaker, Rebecca George, who is the president of the BCS, as well as a leading partner in Deloitte. Rebecca George, OBE, CITP, FBCS, I suspect you've got some more letters that aren't on our sheet there as well, is the current president of the BCS, and she's also a managing partner at Deloitte, leading the public sector practices across 13 European countries. She's also a liveryman, and she's on the court at the Worshipful Company of Information Technologists, which is a very worthy cause. I've followed their exploits, but managed to avoid getting roped into it for years now. It's an excellent organisation. Delighted to see you're a court in the court. And she's also a member of the board of the City Mental Health Alliance. Non-executive chair of T-Level Reform Programme Board at the Department of Education. And she got her OBE in 2006 for her work for the government on sustainable communities. So we are truly delighted and honoured that Rebecca is able to join us today for this session. And I think at that juncture, Rebecca, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you at this session this evening. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I've been in and around consultancy since 1985, which seems a very, very, very long time. But it is my, it's what I do, it's my passion. And certainly for the last 20 years working with my public sector clients, it has been an absolute privilege. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my observations about what's happening in IT consultancy today, which of course is very different from what was happening a year ago, and what might happen in the future. I'm just going to share my screen. So hopefully you can all see that okay. I'm seeing a nod from Simon, so that's helpful. I'll need to make sure that I can advance it. So I'll get started. The pandemic has changed so much, hasn't it? I was thinking the other day that on March the 11th, I became BCS President, and on March the 12th, I came home to Somerset for the weekend. And I haven't been back to work since then. And I look back now and I think of all the things we did that we didn't think were privileges. We didn't think were anything unusual. We just thought they were the way we lived our lives, and they all just disappeared. And it has been, such an unlikely scenario. It was beyond all of our ken, wasn't it? But it also came at a very interesting time when other things that were going on, when a new generation and the power of social media was already causing us to fundamentally challenge our thoughts, behaviour, and impact on each other and the world that we live in. It's very difficult to predict what the future is going to be like. I'm hoping that we will move to a new normal, that we won't just snap back and start and continue to do all the things that we were doing before, particularly things like just-in-time global supply chain management, it taking 43 countries to make an iPhone, or 85% of PPE being made in China. There are some things I think we kind of need to rethink how we do as a world, how we collaborate with our neighbours around the world, how we work together. I think we need to reassess the conversations that we're having with each other and with our clients. Our industry is going to have to consider a vastly changing client landscape. It doesn't matter which sector you work with, but all of our clients have undergone significant shifts in the last year. And COVID has accelerated and magnified many of the topics that we were already wrestling with before lockdown started. So think about, for example, the decline of the high street. It was already happening. It has accelerated. Conversely, think about using Amazon and home shopping. That's also accelerated. Our workplaces transformed overnight, didn't they? All those things that we thought might be really difficult to do turned out to be really easy. I was hugely impressed with the BCS at how quickly they moved their staff home and how quickly they moved their operations online. And it was the same for Deloitte. Overnight, all of our workforce moved home and have been at home, more or less all of us, ever since. And I think we're going to have to think very carefully about what the future looks like for us, for our clients, and for our workforces. 2 years ago, we were all talking about the fourth industrial revolution and the increasing importance of technology in the form of automation, machine learning and AI, ethics. We've been hearing a lot about that at the BCS for the last few years. They shape how we work and do business. But it's now clear, I think, to all of us that IT skills are not just work skills, but life skills, and equate to our ability to engage with society. When I took over as president, I spoke in support of the BCS mission to make IT good for society. And I said that new technologies must work for every community and every individual. A key to making IT work for every community and every individual is a diverse workforce. And our understanding of this continues to evolve. I've been working with the BCS on the issue of trying to get more women into the IT industry for 20 years. We haven't made a lot of progress. On a good day, I think if we hadn't done anything, perhaps we'd be in a worse position. But to be honest, we're not in a great position with women, and other ethnic minorities are in a much worse position, especially women. According to the BCS latest analysis, women make up 20% of the industry. You can argue about a few percentage points. But Black women are severely underrepresented and make up just 0.7% of the sector. And that's 2.5 times worse than other industries. So, you know, we're missing a lot of talent, but we're also missing the opportunity to be relevant to every community and every individual. There are many visible initiatives supporting gender and ethnic diversity, and I'm proud that the BCS is developing a programme of engagement and support for underrepresented groups throughout the IT industry. I think this will help strengthen and diversify the pipeline of talent coming through. However, it's not just about gender and ethnicity. We also need to be thinking about digital poverty, the digitally left behind, the challenge of socioeconomic diversity. Deloitte research shows that amongst those who have an annual household income of less than £13,500, 18% do not own or have access to a desktop or laptop computer. Lockdown has shifted the status of many devices from a nice to have to a must have, as education is now predominantly virtual. Digital inclusion has improved in recent years, but those without access to the right technology, so-called digital poverty, or the skills to use the technology are struggling. Technology and access to it should now be seen as a utility requirement, as fundamental to our lives as water and electricity. There is an urgent need to get computers into the homes of children who are currently unable to access online lessons. Deloitte's 5 Million Futures programme recently donated £8,000 to each of its 26 partner schools to help with their ongoing COVID-19 requirements, and has donated 5,000 of its laptops to UK schools, charities and families. While 5,000 laptops is a fraction of what's required, that's 5,000 additional people getting the critical digital access that they otherwise would not have had. I am aware that here in Somerset, our community and many, many hundreds of others all over the country have also been stepping up in personal capacity to support our local schools. And of course, it's not just school children who are the digitally left behind. There's a whole generation of older people whose digital skills are outdated or were always non-existent. And they also need to be digitally aware as well. The 2020 World Economic Forum Future of Jobs report reported that inequality is likely to be exacerbated by the dual impact of technology and the pandemic. So this is a double worry. The ONS did analysis of jobs at risk from automation and found women, young people, and those on 0-hour contracts are most at risk. Out of the estimated 1.5 million jobs in the UK at risk of being automated, 70% are held by women. As consultants, we all are looking to shape and lead tomorrow's debate. As the diversity landscape changes, the hashtags and initiatives will need to evolve. As an industry, we are often challenged about the number of female partners or cultural mix, but at some point we're going to have to start asking other, potentially more difficult questions and try to understand more nuanced answers. How many people are delaying a family till they achieve promotion to a certain grade? How many of our recruitment initiatives require a degree as an application criteria? 50% of the population don't take degrees. Perhaps the answers to these questions will inform us on how accurate our own estimates of progress really are. The first lockdown and our subsequent experiences over the last year represent a paradigm shift in how we work and engage with each other. I suspect we might pick up some of this in the discussion later on. The effectiveness of remote IT workers is no more a matter of opinion, as collaborative technologies are adopted and integrated almost overnight, and I think you're on mute became a catchphrase. As we look to the future and return to whatever the new normal is going to be, we have to consider what it might look like, not just through the lens of productivity or deliverables, but also well-being and mental health. Critically, this is not a decision just for the C-suite, but for all of us. Remote working has led to the democratizing of the workplace, at least to a certain extent. Virtual meetings put us all on the same footing. We can all hear each other, share screens and chat. With videos on, we're able to see each other, and audio-only calls have become a rarity. Families and home life inevitably encroached on our work, and that turned out to be completely okay. I'm sure many of you have children on half term this week. I've seen a number of colleagues' children this week and in other recent weeks in the background because they need mummy or daddy to do something for them. Do you know, it's absolutely fine. What may not be fine is that fine line between home and work is even finer, or perhaps non-existent, than it was a year ago. As it says here, 55% of UK workers believe that their colleagues are just as, if not more productive now, working from home than before the lockdown was first imposed. 72% of UK employees would like to work remotely more often in the future, 10% more than any of our European peers. And that's interesting, isn't it? I'm not quite sure what that is. CFOs believe that the pandemic is set to trigger a fundamental change in the business environment. 98% of CFOs expect flexible and home working to increase, with a 5-fold increase in home working expected by 2025. Companies that do not take this time as an opportunity to ingrain working from home as a standard practice will miss out. To effectively work remotely and flexibly for the long term, leaders must trust their employees to manage their time and workload, and must implement appraisal systems which are outcome-based and measurable. Presenteeism must become extinct. Employee engagement will be under threat as individuals spend much of their working week away from their teams, So strong team management and providing opportunities for career development is essential to ensure that motivation does not slump. I have a personal view, actually, that what we're going to see is a lot more blended meeting environments going forward, where you'll have some people in the room and other people remotely at the same time. And I think we've got work to do, haven't we, with the technology to make that work well. I was talking to a colleague this week who is in Dubai. He doesn't reside in the UK, which is how that happens to be possible. And he was spending this week in an office, in a room with his client, reviewing an engagement, and all the project teams were appearing on Zoom in the room. So they had that, that mix of remote and present at the same time. He said it worked absolutely brilliantly. I think we're going to be seeing more of that. However, organisations are still going to be using offices. They will be hubs for collaborative and creative work, with teams coming together in these spaces to focus on specific tasks and projects. I think that many workspaces will be redesigned to cater for this, with open plan offices, for instance, turned into open collaborative spaces designed to encourage innovative thinking. And I think, in the same way as before, one size doesn't fit all. If technology democratizes the workplace, then working conditions have become a new differentiator. From single parents with caring responsibilities and cultures with traditionally multi-generational households to those that just don't have a suitable place to work, working from home will not be conducive to working productively. We have heard positive stories about more time for the family and less time commuting. But with a lack of social interaction and the same four walls, some also experience mental health issues. Leaders must listen sensitively to their teams to ensure they're working in a way that supports their day-to-day role. We discuss this a lot at the City Mental Health Alliance, and I know that many companies have implemented far-reaching mental health and wellbeing programs. I suspect, however, there's a lot more to do going forward. Traditionally, new joiners entering the workplace for the first time were able to learn, in part, by observation. While it's possible to pick up new digital habits, we're still understanding what good looks like in this space. It may also be that those behaviours that we learned are less relevant to a generation raised with more digital interactions. 60% of any message was always said to be body language. What percentage of the message is now set in the background of our Zoom call? We standardised our email signatures to present a professional image. I don't think it's going to be long before firms are starting to coach on background and writing. I think there's a cultural point to make here too. I've said for many years, and I worked for nearly 20 years for IBM, and I've been at Deloitte for nearly 15, two organisations with very strong cultures. People learn about the culture of the organisation they're in by working alongside their colleagues and by seeing their leaders in action. I think we need to think about what we want to be preserving in our cultures and how we want to do that going forward. So a key question for consultants is how this is going to work in the future and what client expectations will be post-COVID. Consultants are going to have to work closely with their clients to understand the best way to work, to use their office space and to use their remote capability. Consultancies may encourage their employees to work from home, but it's likely that some clients will ask for consultants to be present in their offices full-time, and others will ask for them to be full-time remote. And we've seen both with I've seen both with my public sector clients over the last year. The pace of technology continues to accelerate with the powerful allure of configurable out of the box, and with this comes the demand for speed to value. This is a further challenge to the consultancy business, where expectations now are of better, faster, safer, cheaper. Who does this favour? While smaller consultancies may be seen to be more agile and easier to engage, and are able to utilise technology skills to get the latest platform or software installed and consumable, larger consultancies could change shape internally and provide more flexible methods of engagement. Deploying a platform or software, as you all know, is not the same as embedding it in a business, ensuring tangible value on an ongoing basis. Around any technology change, there's a degree of transformation, and the key to unlocking the value of the technology is the successful delivery of that transformation. The apparent success of early adoption may actually be a false flag and lead to frustration when that initial momentum doesn't translate to ongoing success. This challenge may tilt backwards towards a large consultancy, one with a broader skill set, comfortable with new governance structures and the changing regulatory landscape that must arrive alongside the next new thing, eventually. As the pace of technology accelerates, so shortens the lifetime of the associated digital skills. This may be another point in favour of large consultancies that find it easier to maintain pools of the latest certifications and bring different skills to bear over time. This may result in the changing shape of their engagements, though. Smaller teams, with a regular rotation of team members as the challenge develops, blending specialists and generalists to achieve the required outcome. Large consultancies will need to work on the associated narrative to ensure that clients recognise this differentiated route. Challenges in the landscape may not just be driven by client need, but also the technology providers and consultancies themselves. Recognising the value of successful transformation on their future revenue streams, we may see an increase in alliances and ecosystems built on these synergies. Industry brand names saying we can do this, but we need to work together is more credible and easier to understand than choose us, we can do it all ourselves. With focus on tangible value, it may be that fee structures become the future differentiator, with bespoke cost models for each client and possibly within different modules of the same engagement, personalising every engagement. What is our willingness to put fees at risk, to align our compensation directly with the client outcomes, and perhaps not immediate outcomes, but those in the future? Alliances willing to defer fees against value may further be able to tilt the market in favour of those bigger players. These points talk to a landscape from the point of view of the consulting firms. Our research shows that clients see industry knowledge as a competitive differentiator. Industry knowledge can be provided by focused niche players and large consultancies, but a broad skill set within a narrow industry will be a challenge for the smaller players. The solution here places a greater degree of importance on hiring from industry, where knowledge gained from experience sits alongside mature methodology. Now you can say, well, I would say this anyway. I've been a specialist in working only with the public sector for 20 years. And I do genuinely think myself and my teams have competitive advantage because we have deep industry specialisation. I also, however, think we have competitive advantage because we make huge use of a vast bank of independent consultants that work alongside us on many of our engagements. So what about the societal impact? We're seeing an increasing number of actors driven by social motives rather than personal or profit. Hacktivism, horrible word really, or digital disobedience has seen a dramatic rise associated with popular names like Anonymous or WikiLeaks. Technology has given protesters a convenient and powerful means to spread their messages and coordinate action globally. Whilst there is a need for digital collaboration between big data and cyber solutions that anticipate rather than respond, it may also encourage firms to look more closely at the risks associated with their engagements, the intention of these bad actors in the first place. Our research shows that demand for analytics work has been running above market average for several years, with firms seeing data and analytics as a necessary precursor to digital transformation and the ability to use technology such as artificial intelligence and machine learning in their organisation. All digital technologies are not equal, or at least not equally imminent. Clients will need to lay digital foundations such as migration to cloud and the adoption of enterprise platforms in order to be able to use the future technologies. The ability for a CIO to articulate this roadmap and maintain the narrative through budgetary cycles and changes in the marketplace will become another differentiator. Helping clients to succeed in this market will depend on being able to convert insights into action, requiring the type of multidisciplinary approach that Deloitte Digital has pioneered. So in their 2021 annual report, the Management Consultancy Association findings showed that consulting leaders expect the industry to grow by 9% in the next 12 months, with the greatest area of growth in digital technology, highlighting the critical importance of the sector in economic recovery and urgent digital transformation of UK businesses. I hope that you agree with me that that is good news for us. The future is bright, but it is also increasingly complex. We have prided ourselves on our ability to tackle client challenges, but it's clear that we will have to do this going forward, whilst at the same time understanding how societal change affects our ability to do so. Whatever line existed between society and the workplace is gone, and the mission that the BCS set itself to make IT good for society has never been more meaningful or relevant. Now, Alan's asked me to finish off just talking about a couple of questions that he posed to me. The first one is, what is it like being a managing partner in one of the big four? And the second is, what is it like being the president and also a consultant? So I'm going to finish off with a couple of comments on both of these questions. And I'll just say, for starters, I don't really know what it would have been like if I hadn't been either of those things, because obviously this is what I am. But I'll try and give you a few perceptions. So first of all, being a managing partner at Deloitte. Deloitte is a team game. So being a managing partner means I work with an amazing team of partners representing all aspects of our business. I think in some organisations, being at the very top can be quite lonely. That's absolutely not the case. At Deloitte, it's definitely not a place where I ever feel lonely or worried that I have to make a decision on my own. With COVID, we moved everyone home quickly. We made a number of very significant decisions very, very early on. We provided support, financial support, to set up home offices. We made an executive decision not to use the government's furlough process. We worked hard to make sure that we protected every job. We have a very, very strong focus on health and well-being of our staff and also our partners, especially in this latest lockdown, where I think people are more tired and it is harder than it was a year ago. I do, as I said before, feel privileged to lead a great business. Government and public sector is the most interesting, intellectually challenging, exciting place to work. And we are focused on supporting clients facing unprecedented challenges, dealing with COVID, as well as continuing reform agendas, and themselves feeling a strong sense of accountability about their staff and their economies. COVID means keeping an eye simultaneously on strategic vision and tight operational grip. And as an exco at Deloitte, that's what we do. And what's it like being the president of the BCS and also a consultant? So I think I brought a bit of a different perspective to the role. My life has been transformation enabled by IT. I'm not a techie. My first degree was in English language and literature. The second was in cable television and satellite systems. So, but you know, I'm not really a deep techie. Membership was my theme when I took over as president, and that's been rather hijacked by COVID. So we turned our attention to being focused on making sure the foundations were in place to increase membership, improving the membership experience, for example, the role of fellows, Black Lives Matter actions, and introducing the Society Medal. I have a great desire that those people that commission IT systems, when they do so, they should ask in their RFPs for some kind of proof or evidence of how the IT people who are going to build the systems they're commissioning are properly qualified to do the job. For me, that's a core reason why IT professionals should be accredited. So I've continued to press for that through the year. I do think that the people being proposed to design, build, test, implement and run and assure our critical hidden infrastructure are appropriately qualified so to do. We are privileged as consultants to work across a breadth of geographies, companies and industries. Having this experience and range of colleagues to draw on during my presidency has been a real asset, as it has allowed me to discuss the key challenges and opportunities with BCS members, no matter what their background. And it's important for consultants like us to be technology agnostic and focused on identifying the right sets of architectures and solutions for our clients' unique and individual challenges. And finally, I have been able to call on wonderful and talented people to support me, including for this particular session, special thanks to Stefan, Chris and Lizzie. And now it's over to you for questions.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you very much for the talk. I have a couple of questions, so I'm going to be asking people to unmute themselves. The first person that I'm going to be asking is Peter Leeson, and I have two questions from him. One is towards the involvement of a woman in the industry, and the other one would be regarding why what a consultant should be keep doing to be relevant. But I will let Peter to do it in his own words.
Thank you.
Right. Yes. First question is, why do you believe there are so few women in this industry? I have worked a significant amount of time in countries like the People's Republic of China or Romania. And I find in both cases, well, in China, certainly parity is largely the norm. In Romania, it's very close to parity. I have even given talks and run workshops in Romania where there were only IT women in the room.
And is that, not the most senior levels, Peter?
Yes.
Yeah.
I know CEOs of IT companies that are women. I know IT companies that are entirely run by women, the senior engineer. In fact, and that is the second part of the question, actually, is in general, in my experience, I have found that women make better managers than men. Men tend to probably be, and I'm sorry if I'm generalizing and going to offend all kinds of people, but men generally tend to be better focused technologists, while the women tend to be better managers and team coordinators or team leaders. And I'm sorry for all the people of all genders that I've just offended there. But that's
I'll do my best to address both great questions, Peter. So why are there so few women, and why particularly in the UK and other societies which look and feel a bit like us from a cultural point of view? I think there are several reasons. When I was at IBM, I used to do talks a lot for parents, and I used to ask the audience. I always used to say to them, put your hand up if you know a doctor or a nurse or a policeman. And everybody in the audience would put their hand up. These were parents, right? And then I'd say, okay, put your hand up if you know an IT executive. And like 3 hands might go up, or 2. And then I'd say, now put your hand up if you know a woman IT executive, and there was never any. So there is a real issue with role models, but it's not just about role models. It's also about parents not knowing what kinds of jobs are available for their daughters to do, not having any kind of reference point to understand that. I also think, and I've thought this for a long time, that the way that pupils make choices about the subjects they study at schools, particularly co-educational schools, leaves a lot to be desired, particularly for girls taking any STEM subjects. Arguably, you could say that the content of the courses is not particularly sympathetic to and I take your generic here, the generic way that girls learn, which is generically different from boys. There's always exceptions to the rule, but generically they're different. The other thing is, once you get into the workplace, and believe me, companies like IBM and Deloitte work massively hard to make sure that we're 50-50 at the graduate stage. But you know what? Traditionally, and I think this is changing, but traditionally, we have recruited very nice middle-class people from middle-class universities into our graduate programs. And it's a social norm in our country. It's just a fact that, when people get married, and many of them still do in their mid-late 20s, it's a social norm for the woman to take more time off work than the man. And it's very difficult then to get back into the workplace after you've had children and continue with such a kind of, ambitious career. I've often said one of the main reasons why I'm sitting here today is because my husband, who was an academic, gave up work when our children were 1 and 3 and brought them up. So he is the good man standing behind the woman. So, I don't know whether that answers the question, Peter, but...
Should BCS encourage their partners to be signatories of things like the Tech Talent Charter, which seeks to equalize diversity in the technical world?
So I think
Deloitte part of the Tech Talent Charter.
So I do think charters are useful and helpful, and they do serve to focus people's minds. But I happen to be of the opinion that if we're going to have a lot more women, especially getting into the more senior levels, we need to overhire, and it's not just women, it's ethnic minorities as well, at the start of people's careers, and draw from a bigger pool. So we need more women and ethnic minorities early on, because some of them are going to drop out as they go through, and we need to have a bigger pool when we get to later on. I'm also a great fan, by the way, of hiring women who are more experienced. I'm looking for the word that doesn't mean older, but you know what I mean. Because I think that women who come back into the workplace having had children are fantastic employees, often very, very loyal. Let me just make a quick comment on your second question there about women being better managers than men. So I think that generically women are quite different from men in the workplace, and there is research to back this up. Typically women are different in the way they present to interviews. They're different at the way they present in annual appraisals. They don't tend to be as confident in negotiating salaries, and they present differently when they're managing people. And this is generic. There are always exceptions to the rule. But I think it's important we all recognise that people are different, and we value and celebrate that difference and make the most of it in our working cultures, rather than try to make everybody fit one size fits all, which isn't comfortable for everyone.
The figures from KPMG a few years back, when it was part of my territory to know these things, were quite interesting, because at the entry level, it was pretty much 50-50. By the time people had managed to make their way to the partnership, it was down to 18%. I believe those numbers were in the public domain, so I'm not really
they are.
sure.
Yeah.
So the problem wasn't at entry level. The problem is the progression through to the top of the organisation.
And we're all working on it really hard. When I was on the main board of Deloitte Northwest Europe a couple of 3 years ago, there were 35% of the board were women. But if you look at the overall population of female managing partners, it's very, very small. So, our partner levels are definitely better. I think we're up to 23%. But there's work to do. There's definitely work to do, and it takes sustained focus.
Hi, thank you very much for the answer. I saw a few comments. We have few women today in the...
I saw that too, yes. I did notice as well, few women out there, thank you.
So maybe some of the attendees, the female attendees, want to make a contribution as well about the topic.
while we're waiting to see if any of the women want to say anything, there is a question that I've noticed in the chat, which is about managing remote teams. I thought perhaps I might just pick up on that. Antonio, is that all right?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine too.
I think this is a really interesting question because back in 1995, I had my first line manager role, and it was in America in IBM's consulting group. And I had a team of people around the world that I never met. And so that was my first line manager role. And so I got really used to managing teams right from the very start of my kind of management career. And working in a global organization like IBM, you did get used to it. And they also moved a lot of people home in the early 1990s. They subsequently moved quite a lot of people back. That's a whole other case study. But I grew up as a manager, and then, you know, in my early executive roles, being very comfortable with having teams in lots of different countries and all over the place, and using same time all the time and instant messaging as well as email and so forth. And actually, I will say, I think that experience has been hugely helpful over the last year, because, you know, you kind of drag back some of that experience that you had 20 years ago and reapply it in the environment today. It's much easier to do it today with video technology. That's made a huge difference. But I still think there's a place for people to meet face to face, and I think we have to work that out going forward. I did think, you know, at the beginning of the pandemic, I had quite a lot of conversations with people in Deloitte Digital. I did think it was going to be very hard to keep the really big digital transformation engagements going for a long period of time without anybody ever meeting. And I'm really happy to have been proved wrong. You know, standard quality of work, deliverables, outputs, people have been so focused. It's been fantastic. How long it would go, I don't know. I am hoping that we will be able to get people together at least from time to time. But I think there's a balance.
I think Kylie came on her camera, except below to the top of her head, in response to your question about whether any of the women would like to make an observation. And I said she's just put something into chat. So Kylie, did you want to talk to us?
Yes, and actually it came up today in one of the Basecamp things messages, where I just see so much emphasis on getting women into IT, coming sort of this sense of we've got to get girls into STEM at high school and we've got to get them into STEM at university. And I have no STEM background. Rebecca, you just said you had no STEM background. So I'm just wondering if, as an industry, we need to start thinking about whether that's actually counterproductive and is actually sending out a message that says, girls, if you're not into STEM, then tech's not for you, because it couldn't be further from the truth. There's so many fantastic opportunities in IT that are not technical, full stop.
I completely agree, Kylie. I think you make a really important point. I mean, I always felt that being trained in classical music gave me as much of a grounding in technology as learning how to code would have done. And I completely agree with you. There are so many different jobs in technology in our digital world, and I think virtually anybody who's interested can find work. So yes, I agree. I did a very early program. Right when I started working with the BCS, which was around 1997, specifically aimed at recruiting women from arts degrees into the IT industry. And it worked fine. But as with all of these initiatives, you know, the funding ran out after a year or two. The thing got fragmented. We all got moved on to other things. But yeah, I think you make a great point.
Perhaps Penny wants to make a comment on the same topic.
So work for you, Penny, I can see.
It did work for me.
Technology.
It did work for me, yes.
And of course, you know, we do need the deep technical people. We do need the programmers and the systems architects. We do need to have those deep technicians and data scientists, especially now, and the people who are designing the AI. It's just that there are other jobs as well. And the role model issue is, it's the same across the board.
I must admit, I sometimes feel a bit undervalued, because whenever I stick my hand up to say I'll be a role model or whatever, because I'm not technical, I feel like I get a bit overlooked sometimes. Probably also a fact that nobody really understands my niche. But.
So I will tell you to, just to take over and own that stage, Kylie.
Well,
eventually people will stop undervaluing you.
No, but in that specific area, I'm not undervalued elsewhere, but in that specific area, it's interesting. Yeah. But also, actually, I also think there's potential routes for, my niche is IT asset management, and a large number of women in IT asset management come up through an IT administration route. And indeed, that's one of the ways that I got into it. I used to work as IT admin, just, raising purchase orders and stuff like that. And then you get shunted off into IT asset management. But it's an amazing career path if you want to go down that route. So again,
you make a really interesting point, which is slightly different, but as chair of the T-level reform program board, I'm really interested in the educational opportunities for the other 50% of the population that don't go to
uni. Yeah.
And every single T-level, and there will be 24 of them, will have a digital component, because it doesn't matter what you do, going forward, you have to have digital skills. So I think if all apprenticeships and all T-levels and a lot of other further education offerings all have digital components, I think that's going to help us to understand better the range of digital capability we need in our industry. Right, Antonio, where are we going next?
Okay, so we have. Thank you very much for the answer. I really like the end of it. At some point in my past, I have met people that they don't have a degree in IT. They might not have even a degree at all, but they have entered in the profession and they have developed themselves, and they are extraordinary professionals. And some of them have followed courses from the BCS. And they have become extraordinary professionals without having to be passionate about STEAM at the beginning. It would be great to have more people interested in STEAM in the beginning, but if you don't have this passion at the beginning, doesn't mean that you cannot come back later. We have the question from Steve. We have another question from Peter, which is with regards to the transformations of what a consultant must keep doing to keep relevant. So probably he can rephrase the question, but he's asking regarding the ISO 2700, and if it's going to be mandatory to follow up on this to keep relevant to the profession.
Watch out, because I was referring to the ISO 20700, not 2700, which is the security one. 20700 is the standard for consultancy and consultants and how they should act at the customers, what has to be included in their contractual agreements, and how they guarantee the quality of their work. And I would very much like to see the BCS encouraging their registered consultants to be trained at least in ISO 20700.
Seems very sensible to me, Peter.
Rebecca, is that something you'd be doing within Deloitte for your own people, the 2700?
Probably. I'd have to go and check. But yes, I would imagine so. We have a very comprehensive continual professional development program, and if it's a requirement, then we'll be doing it.
Unfortunately, it is not a requirement, and very few companies know about it or bother to ask for it, which means very few consultants bother to get trained in it, which means very few people know about it, and we're back in the cycle.
Oh, well, maybe that's something else for me to go back and ask about then, Peter.
I think one of the things you would find in Deloitte, as well as in KPMG, where I worked in the past, is that the internal control processes in those big firms are enormously more robust than the requirements of the ISO standard. So it's almost kind of feels irrelevant when you're working at such a higher standard of assurance and quality control that I can well understand if the big firms aren't that excited about it. Certainly useful, I think, for people who haven't got robust quality processes.
I will go and find out about that in Deloitte. I don't know. I mean, my specialist area, as I said earlier, is public sector. And one of the big changes in public sector procurement over the last few months has been the introduction of marks for social value in procurement. So we've been spending a lot of time thinking about, well, what is the social value of the work we're doing? And how can we explain that in a way which is authentic and not just about the marking process? So that's, I know a lot more about that, Peter, than I know about 20,700, but I will go and ask the question.
I think it's worth just saying that 2,700 is very new, isn't it, Peter? It's only been around for about a year, and these things just take time to become known about.
So I think it's 2 or 3 years now, but it is new and it is very valid as far as I'm concerned.
We had a talk about it back in the days when we could meet face to face at the BCS. I'm not sure if there's a video of it, but we certainly had it on our agenda previously.
I have a comment from Martin. Maybe he wants to speak himself, but just want to introduce it. Before we have mentioned that one obstacle for joining or to progress their careers into the senior levels for women, it was that they have to give up their career for the kids. Now that we are working from home, it seems that because people are working from home, there has more availability or more chances to helping at home and perhaps or contributing at home, and perhaps that gives the chance to the home wife to get a further interest in computer science or in their careers, on to people that have to have kids to don't give up on their opportunities. So we have Martin. Maybe Martin wants to expand a little bit more.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've been in the IT consultancy for about 15, 20 years, and a lot of the big contracts and stuff that I work for have always been. I'm based in Northern Ireland, and a lot of the time I have to travel abroad, be away, come back on a Thursday nights and stuff like that. So I think my wife made a decision. My career excelled quicker than hers, so the decision was she would stay at home and bring up the kids. And then since lockdowns happened, that has definitely freed up a lot of that time where I can contribute to homeschooling and socializing with my kids, which actually helps me as a parent as well, but it also frees up her time to go and do stuff for her career or hobbies or meet her friends. So it's taken a lot of pressure off. It's freed up a lot of her time where it's a said, before that, when I was away, she would have spent her full time looking after the kids, cooking, cleaning in the home, where I think now that's definitely been a game changer for her.
So I'm really pleased to hear that, Martin. And I'm going to try not to be too cynical about this. I genuinely think that a lot more men are finding that they can contribute a huge amount more at home in lockdown and with COVID, both running the home, but also helping out with the children. Sadly, I think there are lots of men who are not. And there are lots of women. I think that the early research of COVID shows there are a lot of women who are taking more of a burden of housework and homeschooling than their partners in the lockdown, and trying to manage a full-time job as well. So What we need, Martin, is we need more role models like you, and we need more understanding in our society of those different role models and those different balances, and how people can work together from home and in a job, 2 jobs, in an effective way. I do think, and there'll be people on this call who have children on half term this week, but I do think it's much easier when the children are going to school.
From my perspective, there's also a reward from my side. I feel more inclusive in my family being at home.
Yeah.
Whereas, it used to be I'd be away 4 nights a week, back the weekends, and then obviously trying to compress all the family time over the weekends. But if that's just my opinion, that's worked out well for me.
Well, and I think, many of us have had a life mainly away from home, and certainly until COVID, I live in Somerset, as I said, but until COVID, I spent 4 days a week in London and did for 15 years. So I'd go to London on a Monday, come back on a Thursday, work from home on a Friday, and that was my life, because my clients were not in Somerset. Some of them were in London, some of them weren't. They wanted to see me, and I went to see them. So I didn't go home. And many, many, many people in consultancy have done that for many years. So I think part of my thesis tonight has been, I think that should change now. I hope that will change. But I think all of us in the industry are going to have to think very thoughtfully and talk to our clients about how that changes and what that, the new normal looks like going forward.
Very good. I see another conversation going through the chat between Josh and Stephen.
I can see it too. Hi, Josh.
Josh.
Hi, Rebecca. Yeah, hi.
Do you want to expand a little bit on the conversation?
Well, it was the comment about social value and whether there are metrics. In my experience, when it comes to public sector tenders, there may well be some metrics that are set in order to be able to establish some quantifiable difference between tenders. But frankly, I would like to see the industry as a whole step up to the mark, basically, to support our public services in many of their endeavours. So innovation, research, local projects, apprenticeships, support for, education, job creation, building works, the list goes on. I think it can be a win-win, because I think it can potentially build a long-term relationship with the supplier, but it has got to be more than lip service and just good intentions to do some sort of public good, because frankly I don't think that's going to be good enough, and the UK will require much more than that.
So I couldn't agree more, Joss, and I know you know this stuff really, really well. The industry has been trying to engage positively with the Cabinet Office around the measurement process for social value. My personal view is we still have a gap between really adding value and doing work that has social value and purpose and completing an RFP. Having said that, I do think the government has to start somewhere. And the framework that they've put in place is a starting point. And if I look at public sector procurement in my 20 years in the job, it's changed, fundamentally changed. Everything is different now. And you kind of have to start somewhere. But I do think, Josh, we have a responsibility as an industry to be able to articulate what social value means. And our clients in the public sector need to think about what matters to them too. So I do think it's a dialogue.
I do agree, Rebecca. I worry, and I'm not sure if I should say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I worry that Whitehall and central government are a bit of an irrelevance in this. I'm not at all convinced that they would come up with anything that would be relevant at a local level. I think it is now about local public services. It's about regeneration in our regions. It's about reflecting a local demography, geography, economic position. That's where a lot of the social value will come from. And I have little confidence that my colleagues in central government understand this agenda terribly well. And that's not a political statement, by the way. That's a difference between a London-centric big government and local delivery, health, social care, police, community services, and so on. So my view is it's got to be done at a local level, not a national level. But I know I'm a bit prejudiced on that because
I'm gonna leave you, Joss, to present that view to central government and not try to take that on myself. What I will say though is, in a different part of the kind of political agenda, I sit on a business advisory forum for the Secretary of State for Education, and there is a huge willingness and desire for to see local partnerships come together around understanding the skills mismatch, what skills are required, what employers want, what's offered through providers, and what young people want. And I find it hugely exciting because it just is different from what's happened before. And those local partnerships are the ones I think that will make the biggest difference.
Yeah, I agree.
I thought it'd be interesting to hear Stephen's side of the conversation with Joss.
Yeah.
Well, hello. I asked the original question: what metric or model was there? Quite as an open-ended question for social value. What does social value mean? Is there an acceptable or an accepted, even definition of it? Even leaving that to one side. What is that? What are the metrics? What are the models? Is there agreement on it? Is there any standard? What do we mean by it? It seems like a fairly nebulous concept. Social value could mean anything to anybody, really.
So perhaps if I could just...
I'm missing something that's already well established.
No, you're absolutely right, and it is a very good question to ask. There is some good guidance coming from central government, having just slated Whitehall somewhat, but there's some good guidance about what would be the components of social value. I think your point is, so what are the specifics? Are there standards? Are they measurable, and so on? In my experience, certainly at this stage,
coming from government, what are they basing good guidance on? Who's done any work as to the model of an agreement on what even social value means, and how do we model it, and how do we project it and predict it?
So I don't think. Right.
I would like to see what Rebecca knows about things
I'm
about.
not criticising.
No, so Stephen, you make a really
strange phrase, social value.
So you make a really important point, and I was obliquely referencing it when I said that there is a template and there is a dialogue, and the government has made a start. And if you search social value and Cabinet Office procurement, you will see that there's quite a lot of stuff available from the Cabinet Office to support procurement around what they are talking about with social value. Joss's point and my point is that's not necessarily social value. So I think there is a dialogue to be had about really what is it and how do you measure it, and it means lots of different things. But at the end of the day, it's about doing work that actually has a purpose and an impact. And I think we all think we do that. And I think the idea is that we work out how to provide the evidence that we do that.
Can I add, Antonio?
Yes.
Just very, very briefly, I don't want to hog the floor on this, but generally speaking, the difference between the top few tenders in a public sector procurement is slim. The judgment and the weighting, it's usually quite sophisticated, but at the end of the day, it is not uncommon that you've got 2 or 3 at the top of the pile and they could all do the job, and they're all pretty good. Which means that the ability to demonstrate added value above and beyond the provision of widgets and bits and bytes and whatever it is really valuable. But the way in which that has to be measured is based on the contract letter, the client. So if you are a small council in a rural area, you may well have a whole range of different social value metrics that work for you than, let's say, a large government department in central London, or an international department such as Department of International Trade, who I do work with. So I think it is important for the individual organisation to be able to define the precise metrics within the context of the framework that's being described and I've put in the chat.
I see that Kylie has got an interesting question, which is kind of moving us on to a different topic, if that's okay.
Yeah, so I've read that. I just read that question, Kylie. Yes, the answer is we are really worried about not just our graduates, but also our bright starts, our apprentices. And we are, it's not just them actually, it's our consultants and senior consultants as well, because typically, as I said earlier, a lot of people learn how to behave, particularly on client engagements, by being in the room with their senior managers, directors and partners and seeing what they do and learning by observation. And we are, and there are multiple dimensions to how you address this problem going forward. One is, you know, what happens if all the partners say, oh, I think I quite fancy this working from home lark. I think I'm going to carry on working from home. Well, that isn't going to work, is it? But it's just as bad if all the partners decide to go back to the office, because then all the staff will think they have to be there because all the partners are there. So, you know, I mean, I think this is possibly worse in a partnership than it might be in other organisations. But I think we have to think so carefully about getting the balance right. A lot of our young people want to work more from home, and they'll leave and go somewhere else if they can't. So we have to work out going forward how we manage that, how we manage their mental health and well-being, how we manage their education and learning, what we do about role modelling, what we do about being present. I think we are in the foothills of thinking about this right now.
Yeah, so it sounds like Deloitte is aware of the issue, but is at the process of thinking, how do we manage this moving forward, which is probably where a lot of organisations are, I would say. I was just wondering if there had been anything concrete.
So we have, for our public sector clients, we have produced a short report on this issue, kind of the going back to work dilemma, and how to approach it from a public sector organisation point of view. I wouldn't say we have any answers. I just don't think anybody really does just yet. I think we all know, however, that we have to be really mindful of the fact that we don't snap back to what we were doing before and have bad behaviours, and B, accidentally create second-class citizens in people who make life choices or health choices not to be in the office. So I just think we are going to spend a lot of time thinking about this and trying out different things with our clients and learning what works.
Okay, yeah, it's true. We have a question from Stephen. Maybe he wants to mention. We were talking when he mentioned about the skills about the woman. I think Simon was commenting that.
That's right. Yes. So Stephen asked a question about should AI itself be more feminine.
Correct.
So I read this question earlier. It was the one I was looking for, and I thought to myself, and my initial reaction was, no, we're after unconscious bias in AI, aren't we? And I think, and then I thought afterwards, or do we want just to make sure that we have unconscious bias, or do we actually want to bring? I think this is where you're going, Stephen. We should be thinking about feeding in more of the emotional intelligence side. Do you want to say more? Can you give me an example? You need to come.
I am muted, yeah. I know, I can't give you an example. I'm an expert. The thing about experts is you ask questions, you don't even know why you're asking them or what they even frame the question means, never mind about the answer. It just was a question that came to me.
Brilliant.
That's right. There is this kind of paradox about trying to make AI.
Oh, hang on, Stephen. We're losing you.
The audio is not good.
Well,
so I'll tell you what. I'll just say a couple of words on this, and we see whether it makes sense. But I think we need to be hugely careful with artificial intelligence going as we go forward. And my starting point would always be to double check, then triple check that when you write the code, you're not allowing any unconscious bias to creep in. And then when you assure the outcome over a period of time, you assure the fact that you're not drifting away from where you want to go. I do worry that quite a lot of code is being put out there in a rather ungoverned and unstructured way, and we're not quite sure where it's going. If we could work out how to build more emotional intelligence into our artificial intelligence, that may have pros, but it may also have cons. And it would be nearer to the way that the human brain works, wouldn't it? Which, of course, is both nirvana and hell, depending on where you're coming from. I think I probably would land on with it. It's a great question, and it's a whole other session, isn't it? But I think I'd probably land on I'd go with starting with no bias at all, and then checking there's no bias, and get that right first before we worry about whether we're building in emotional intelligence.
I read a very interesting article today about an AI company who have developed a recruitment bot, so to speak, and a research organisation did assess this bot and found that actually it was in theory doing psychometric testing, and the decisions it was making about where that person fell against the different psychometric elements was turned out to be based entirely upon the background and the lighting. It was just quite extraordinary. And yet it's a popular product being sold to HR organizations. So, but I think what's interesting is as a profession, and I mean in tech in general, and we're starting to become more interested in outcomes. So I wonder if to a certain degree, as a sort of just as a society, we're going to have to start examining outcomes. And if we start examining outcomes, then we can start testing AI against a set of outcomes. But it's not just an AI issue either. I was thinking, that would also apply to, I mean, we're seeing that a little bit in things like, the aspiration to have 30% of NEDs as women, and, companies being asked to publish their gender pay gaps and things like that. I mean, that's the government saying, we want an outcome, which is gender pay equality. And can you please demonstrate where you are in order to achieve that? But I wonder if that's something, that approach is something that might be useful to apply to AI as well as in the broader, trying to drive policies through.
Yeah, I think that really could be a good idea. I come from a part of Deloitte which specialises in assurance, and I think assuring IT systems once they are built, implemented, and are being run is as important as any other part of the cycle. And I think, Kylie, that's what you're talking about, is assuring your outcomes, assuring what is happening, and making sure you're actually getting the result that you intended or the result you wanted. And I worry we don't do this enough.
Yeah, we tend. I mean, I also come from a niche that is quite focused on assurance, or should be, and it tends to get forgotten about because you get so into doing the building, you sort of the monitoring and the governance and making sure that you're staying on track tends to get lost in all the excitement of the new.
Well, I do quite like your journey from IT asset management actually into AI assurance. I could see a great career path for people. actually doing that.
We have 7 more minutes. I see that I have comments from in the same topic from Peter, Stephen, and Josh. Maybe you want to make a comment.
I just think that AI is still, I know I'm not supposed to use this word, but it's still being programmed. I'm an old man, I like the old word, by white men, and therefore brings in all the prejudice and the bias of the typical white man, which is why we have facial recognition things that can't recognize Japanese or African people. It's dramatic, and again, I think the lack of diversity in our industry is a scandal.
So I mean, you could say, Peter, that every aspect, or more or less every aspect of how our organisations are built, are designed by white men, and therefore biased towards them. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about a procurement system or a document writing system, or it's really a sales system. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we are worse in IT in terms of gender diversity, but it's bad everywhere. And that is the world we live in.
AI gets even more interesting. Sorry to jump in. And the example I said before about the company, that the HR company, the problem is that often you program AI, but you're not quite sure how AI is learning. So an even more specific example is apparently there was an AI bot developed that was absolutely brilliant at recognizing huskies. Show it a picture of a husky and it will get it 100% of the time, until somebody showed them a picture of a husky that wasn't on snow. The AI was recognizing dog on snow, but nobody realized that was what the AI had learned until they just did that other test. So it goes even beyond unconscious bias of programmers or anything like that. We actually literally just don't know what this AI is learning. So this is why I think, an outcome-based approach is probably the only, it's my thought. Let's, going back, eschew the AI. And we don't release AI until we've actually tested it again just as we do with software, tested it in a particular way, tested it to destruction, and the outcomes of what we need those outcomes to be. But, we'll have to go through a learning process of how to do that as well. It's all going to be very iterative over the next few years, I think.
And one of the things I think we need to do is to pull in data scientists who are themselves often the orchestrators or the coders of AI. I don't know how many of you know that the BCS is doing a really, really interesting piece of work with the Royal Statistical Society and about 3 other organisations around what the data scientist profession looks like and how that profession should be accredited. Personally, I think this is really important, and for me, it's part of the BCS collaborating in a really positive way with other organisations, responding to and hopefully getting ahead of some of the changes in technology. But I think we need to bring other people into this debate so that they know, and people who code AI need potentially to know some of this stuff earlier.
Just want to mention that this 5 minutes to 8, 3 minutes to 8. We have 3 more minutes.
Oh, we don't need to use it. Anybody have any final questions for Rebecca? Because we can soon wrap up.
How about a thank you?
Thank you. I was going to do the thank you, but Peter, thank you for the thank you. It was a great session. I enjoyed that.
I will actually, just before you launch into that, Simon, I will actually say, Peter, and everybody, one of the massive privileges and pleasures of being president this year is I've got to speak to more of you. And the being able to come to meetings in a virtual way has enabled me to meet more members and have conversations with members and non-members in a way that I just don't think would have happened. So I am hoping that my successor, John Higgins, who is a great guy, will continue to do virtual stuff as well as live stuff, because I think you reach a wider audience and you have great conversations. So thank you.
Well, absolutely, thank you. It really has been a great session, and it's fascinating the way we have explored some very interesting and important topics, which were distinctly going off at a bit of a tangent from the original brief that we gave Rebecca. So, and that was wonderful. I was delighted. So, very, very best of luck when you move away from the BCS presidency. And we do hope you'll come back and talk to us again. You can even sign up for one of my speaking slots.
And I will come.
And thank you, everybody, for being on Zoom with us. It's been a great session. We'll be interested also if you've got any comments you want to send in to us about the talk today and so on. Bear in mind, we will be back on the air on the 9th of March with Sam Da Silva, and hope to see you all again then. So that's it. Thank you very much. The clock is just about to tick 8 o'clock and it's time for dinner. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Stay safe. Bye-bye.